The 14th Goldfish, Chapter 22, Growing Pains. My grandfather walks into the kitchen a few mornings later carrying a bottle of pain pills. He pours a glass of water and pops a handful of pills. "Are you okay?" I ask him. He's pale with dark circles under his eyes. He doesn't look good. "I'm having growing pains," he says, pointing to his legs. "The T. malvinus must be regenerating my bones." "Does it hurt a lot?" I ask. "Well, let's just say I know what it feels like to be tortured on a rack." My father's back in town for the weekend, and he appears at our front door after lunch. He's wearing old worn-out blue jeans, a black t-shirt, and carrying his toolbox. "Dad!" I shout, flinging myself at him. "Reporting for duty," he tells me, holding up his toolbox. "I hear there's a toilet that needs fixing." My father is handsome, and I don't just say that because I'm his daughter. He's the kind of man who women stop and stare at when he walks into a room. He's got thick, curly black hair and dark brown eyes. He's actually usually cast as a rake or a hero in the play. "I miss working with my assistant," he winks at me. "I brought your hammer." To pay the bills when I was little, my dad would do carpentry work and odd jobs, hauling me around in my baby carrier. When I started teething, I chewed the wooden handle of one of his hammers. It still has my bite marks on it. "Where's your mother?" he asks. "Oh, she's at the high school. They're having trouble with the light board," I tell him. "She said you're cooking dinner." He looks at me. "Are you here by yourself?" "No, Melvin's in the den." "Oh, right," he says. "She mentioned something about a long-lost cousin crashing here. Well, let's get that toilet out of the way." We settle down in the bathroom, and my father snakes the toilet, and then takes the lid off and tinkers around with the insides. "Well, that should do it," he says. "You want to do the honors?" I flush, and the water goes down. "You should have been a plumber, Dad," I say. He gives me a wry look. "Well, I would have made a whole lot more money, that's for sure." My grandfather walks into the bathroom, holding the catcher in the rye. He freezes when he sees my father. "You must be Melvin," my father says. "I'm Allie's dad, Jeremy," and he holds out his hand. My grandfather doesn't reciprocate. "Did you wash your hands?" he asks. "Well, the toilet water's clean," my father says. "Well, then drink it," my grandfather replies. We stand there for a minute, my grandfather holding his book. You gonna stand there yapping all day?" my grandfather asks. "I've got homework to finish." My father makes risotto for dinner. We sit outside on our tiny patio, and adults drink red wine, and my grandfather and I have soda. Between the crisp air, the good food, and my parents trading gossip about their theater friends, I feel like I'm watching an old favorite television show. Except this time, my grandfather is the guest role as the silent, moody teenager. Or maybe he isn't acting. My father and grandfather have never actually been buddies. When my parents first got married, my grandfather said some things to my father that involved the word punk, my daughter, and knocked up. Needless to say, there is no way we could let my dad in on our little secret about Malvin. My grandfather turns to my dad. "So I hear you're an actor. How's that working out for you?" "Well, pretty good," my dad says, actually. "The tour of my production has been extended for another year." "Oh, that's wonderful, Jeremy," my mother enthuses. "Congrats, Dad," I say. My grandfather doesn't look very impressed. He says, "Lots of money performing in Peoria." "Well, I'm in the union," my dad says, "and I've got a great benefits package." My grandfather grunts. My dad smiles at him, faintly curious. "You remind me of someone," he says. "Really?" my grandfather says. "Who?" "Oh, just an old guy, one of those grumpy types." "Actually, you're distantly related to him. Guess Melvin is the family name." My mother and I share worried looks. Then, without a word, my grandfather gets up and goes inside. My father turns to my mother. "Interesting kid," he says. "Oh, teenagers," my mother says, with a careless roll of her eyes. "All clear," I offer, and start picking up the dishes. My parents beam at me. I stack the plates, and what I see when I go into the kitchen almost makes me drop them. My grandfather is pouring red wine into a plastic cup. "What are you doing?" I hiss. "Well, what does it look like I'm doing?" he says, and he drinks from the cup. But, you can't." "Well, why not?" he grumbles. "It's not like I'm underage, and I need something to dull the pain. My legs are killing me." The wine loosens my grandfather's tongue, and he starts to make even more snarky remarks at the dinner table. To be or not to be 13, that is the question, he says. My parents are in deep conversation and don't seem to notice what's going on. We move inside because it's getting chilly, congregating around the kitchen table. I'm going to the bathroom, my grandfather announces and walks out. My mother shakes her head and turns to my dad. Were you like that as a teenage boy? Well, I'm not sure. A puzzled look crosses my dad's face. Mostly I remember being embarrassed by my parents most of the time. She changes the subject. So, Spill, how's Francois? She makes quotes, air quotes around his name when she says it. Francois, I know, is the director of Les Miserables. You mean besides having a French name but actually being from Long Island? Oh, I knew he had a fake accent, my mother says. Well, he has a good speech coach somewhere along the way. The toilet flushes. My father adds, also, his ego is bigger than a blimp. The toilet flushes again. Did you fix it? My mom asks him. I fixed it, my father insists. I think of all the pain pills Melvin took earlier. Worry spikes through me. Maybe we should go check on him, I suggest. We find my grandfather hunched in front of the toilet throwing up. Oh no, do you have food poisoning, my mom says when she sees my grandfather gray in the face. My father sniffs and looks furious. Since when does food poisoning smell like red wine? Chapter 23, Pizza Delivery. My grandfather is grounded. Raj and I wait for him under the flagpole after school. He waits with me most days now. He says the betting money is on my grandfather getting detention again. My grandfather comes running up to us. He's wild-eyed and frantic. I know why they deactivated my key card. I know why they closed my email account, he exclaims. Raj and I just look at him. The company's been bought. They're moving to Malaysia. Malaysia, I ask. It's all over the internet. Who knows what's going to happen to my T. Malvinus? They're probably just going to throw it out. He slams into the bathroom the minute we get home. I decide to set up my microscope and try to lure him out of his bad mood. It comes with a set of prepared slides. There's a fern spore, cotton fiber, a salt crystal, and oddly enough, a goldfish scale. I guess not everybody flushes their goldfish when they die. I look at the goldfish scale under the microscope. It's a beautiful fan of color. I think of all the goldies. Maybe they would have lived if there had been a T. Malvinus compound. Maybe would have had a big tank with all of them swimming around. The doorbell rings, and when I answer it, a kid is standing there holding a pizza box. Pizza delivery, he says. His hair is in a mohawk, and he's got a few rings in his ears and one in his lip. Delivery boys always look a little sketchy, like they're the kids the mall don't want to hire. Hang on, I say, and I call my grandfather. Did you order a pizza? Pepperoni, the kid clarifies. My grandfather comes to the door. I didn't order anything, he says with a frown. What street number do you have? I ask the kid. He looks on the slip in his hand and gives an apologetic smile. Oops, my mistake, he says, and loops away. As I watch him walk away, I remember my grandfather saying how the lab assistants like to eat pizza. I look at my grandfather and smile. I think I know how to get into the building 24. I detail my plan to Raj and my grandfather at the lunch court. Raj dresses up as a pizza delivery kid. He takes a real pizza and he gets buzzed into the lab Raj dresses up as a delivery kid. He takes a real pizza and gets buzzed into the lab by the lab assistants. He drops it off, and on the way out, he grabs T. Malvinus. That way, we don't have to worry about the security guard or a whole key card thing. Not a bad idea, my grandfather says. I turn to Raj. What do you think? Are you up for it? He doesn't hesitate. Sure, I'm in. And your brother too, my grandfather adds. We're going to need a ride. We plan it for Friday. That's the night my mom stays late to run lines with the actors. It should give us plenty of time to get to the lab and back home without her finding out. It's perfect. Except that when Raj shows up at our front door on Friday night, he's alone. Amanda's car is in the shop, he explains. Ananda's car is in the shop, he explains. We stand around the kitchen trying to figure out what to do. He said it should be fixed by next week, Raj tells my grandfather. My grandfather is so frustrated. I don't want to wait until next week. Who knows what will happen in the meantime to my T. Malvinus? So let's just take the bus, Raj says. Do you know how long it will take us to get there by bus? We have to find a pizza place and then get a pizza and then take 4 buses to get there and walk and. But I'm not listening to him. I'm too busy staring at my puzzle on the kitchen table. It's almost finished now. The bustle of the city, the people rushing down the sidewalk, the street fronts, the yellow taxicabs.